Khris Middleton, is he a sleeper value for this season, or is he someone to stay away from? We'll talk about that in this show, as well as a full preview of the Milwaukee Bucks for the upcoming season. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_Beeble, on TikTok at redrock_Beeble, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA or enter the promo code LockedOnNBA for a free water bottle with any purchase. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and we are available on all platforms. All right, we're here to talk about the Milwaukee Bucks. We're here to talk about Khris Middleton. We're going to put him under the lens. Going to give you an opportunity to enter the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl as well. So, warning.
Let's get it on, Gilly.
Oh, man, my voice is actually going at the moment. I'm not going to go through this too much. You know what the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl is. Big field tournaments, categories and points. There is an entry form that is linked down below. Stay tuned later on for a specific question that I will ask you about the Milwaukee Bucks that you can enter. We'll make sure you get right to enter into the Fantasy Basketball Bowl, Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl, and we'll get that cracking. Categories, points, different formats, 18-man rosters, slow drafts, $50 entry. Get those entries in down below. We're going to talk Milwaukee Bucks right now. We might as well just get stuck straight into talking about the team, because this is a pretty interesting team. They have a lot of quality games. 54 of them. That is one off the maximum in the league. 55 is the max, and that's the Phoenix Suns. Why does it matter? It means that anyone that you have on your team from the Bucks, the majority of their games are coming on low volume days. So you're opening up more ability to play bench guys or stream guys on higher volume days. 1 or 2 game difference doesn't make a big impact. But when you're talking about some teams having 40 and the Bucks having 54, that is a little bit of a tiebreaker. They've got 14 back-to-backs, which is going to be important for this team because there are 2 guys coming off knee surgery and 2 guys, those same 2 players, with knee surgery that have knee injuries that look like they're going to be relatively persistent throughout the rest of their career. So watch that one. They only have 13 maximum weeks. It's not the lowest, 12 is. That's weeks where they play the most amount of games out of any team. And their playoff schedule is amazingly identical to the team we did earlier today, the Grizzlies. They go 4-3-3 finishing on the 24th. They go 3-3-3 if you finish 31st of March. 3-3-4 for 7th of April, and 3-4-4 for the final week of the season if you play there on ESPN. So the schedule has that real benefit of the quality games. The playoff schedule for them isn't particularly strong. What are the pressure points, the drone view of their projections? There's a new coach. Mike Budenholzer has been fired and Adrian Griffin is here. So what does Griffin do? We've seen this Bucks defense really benefit someone who is exactly Brook Lopez, enabling him to play a ton of drop, no switch, so that Lopez gets tons of rim protection opportunities, a lot of rebounds, but also a ton of blocks. And that really came to the fore last season. What if Griffin wants to run a Nursey sort of thing, where Nick was out there getting these blokes to pressure the ball, to switch more? Does that impact the way that Lopez plays or how valuable he is? What if Griffin wants to lean into a Nick Nurse rotation plan, in that we play 9 guys a million minutes? Actually, we play 5 guys a million minutes, and everyone else picks up the scraps. I don't know. That's just literally an unknown question. The other thing is it's the knees. It's Giannis' knee. It's Khris Middleton's knee. Both had surgery, and I'm telling you now, Giannis' knee is a problem for the rest of his career. I've told you this for 3 years. Nothing changes. He's not hitting 70 games ever. It's not going to happen. So always put that into your mind when you're considering drafting Giannis. And I know Middleton had this problem back in college with his knee. Didn't really flare up until last season. Remember, he didn't start at the beginning of last season, but that wasn't because of his knee. That was because of his wrist. And then he hurt the knee later on with like soreness developing, which is not a great thing. So we've got those two things. And those, obviously, extended absences from Yanni or from Middleton means things change and you get more Crowder or more Connaughton or more Beasley or more Allen and more Lopez and more Portis. Lots changes depending on the status of those two blokes and their knees. And at this stage, we don't know how much they're going to miss. You can't say, well, they're going to play 40 games. But we do know that Giannis won't hit 70. Middleton probably doesn't, but might. He's had some really big game seasons in the past, but I do worry that this is a different thing. It's not an acute injury. It's a build-up soreness thing, and I'm not certain. I'm not certain that it's going away just yet, unfortunately. Today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. First of all, you don't want to take your Birddogs off. I know this because I've got them on now. And you're going to have to really, really bribe me to get them off. That is how comfortable they are. I can sit and record podcasts in them all day. I can go take the big fella Obi out for a walk in my Birddogs and people will look at my legs and go, oh, man, look at that. This bloke's really got some pins on him, huh? Or we can go to the shops, we can go out for dinner, and I can still be rocking the old Birddogs because they are comfortable, they are stylish, and they make your legs look sexy. Simple as that. It's like the Lululemon leggings. But they're better. Better quality, better look. It's all there. And Birddogs not only gives you the gift of sexy legs, but it gives you the gift of a free water bottle. So if you go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA or you enter the code LockedOnNBA at checkout, you get a free Birddogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you. It's a good promise. Who are some breakout candidates? What do I mean by breakout candidates? You know what I mean by breakout candidates, I hope. It's guys with the potential to exceed their expected projections. And I think we've got to throw Malik Beasley in there. Now, Beasley's one of those players who's unbelievably hot and cold. He's a three-point shooter who does absolutely nothing else. But his competition for a role is Grayson Allen at the moment. And if Allen sucks... Now, Allen is a very good three-point shooter. Excellent. Doesn't do anything else, but that's a little bit of what Beasley does. But if Allen goes in the tank and Beasley shows a little bit more, there's a chance that he could start over Allen. The other thing is that if Middleton misses or Drew gets hurt or Giannis is out and Beasley's able to ramp into third offensive option, well, he could take 10 threes a game. Easily. Or over 10 threes per 36 at least. He reins them in at almost a higher rate than anybody in the NBA. I'm not drafting Malik Beasley unless I'm in a deeper format or something where we can extend those benches out a bit, but there's a little bit of upside there. And I could say the same thing from last year's first-round pick, Marjon Beauchamp. The reason that I say that he's a breakout candidate is that I've got his baseline projection for this season really low because honestly, I don't think he is very good. I have not seen anything good from him so far. He came in with a reputation of, he's going to be a good defender and maybe there's some offensive stuff there. I'm not even sure he's been a good defender so far. And watching him at Summer League, I was just like, well, no, we're year 2 here and you still can't score or shoot. And I don't know what I'm saying that's supposed to be impressing me. It doesn't mean that he can't be good ever. Doesn't rule things out. And again, there is a gaping gap in the rotation at the 2 where Allen and Beasley are very far from certainties. But Beauchamp can't shoot. And while he might be in the rotation on the bench, I don't really see huge things for him. But there is the potential for it. The other one there I've put is Ty Washington. I could also put Lindell Wigginton because currently the backup point guard on the Bucks is Ty Washington or Lindell Wigginton. I guess theoretically you could say it's Andre Jackson, but if I thought Marjon Beauchamp's shooting and offense was bad, well, I don't know what I would classify Andre Jackson as. Now, Jackson's a very good and a very impactful winning defensive player. That's the difference between him and Beauchamp. But the shooting, man, every time he touched it and put something up, you just went, ugh, no way. And if he averaged under 3 points per game this season, Andre Jackson, I wouldn't be shocked. Their backup point guard situation is rough. Ty, former first-round pick from Kentucky. I actually do think he can become a valuable rotation player, but he's on a two-way. But what if Drew gets hurt? What if he is the backup point guard? What if they have to convert into a full-time contract and he can actually run as a first-unit guy. That is a lot of ifs, and we're talking 0.1 of 0.1%, which actually turns out to be a bigger number than you think, but that doesn't matter. No, it doesn't actually, sorry. It's small. But Washington's in a position where if he's ever going to be able to show that he deserves a bigger role, well, there's not a million veterans in front of him. He's got a chance here. So it's just something to watch, I think. Let's take Khris Middleton under the lens. Middleton had a pretty bad season. We all know this. We thought he might miss a week or two to begin the season with the wrist injury. That extended out a little bit further than we thought. He didn't come back until week 7. Then he came back and played like a couple of weeks, played poorly, and then the knee flared up. And then he came back at the end, when he come back around week 16 and played limited minutes. It's giving very much the way that Damian Lillard was treated before last season, where the year before he struggled with his shot. He barely played, and these aren't the same caliber of players, obviously. But you could get Damian Lillard in the 20s of fantasy drafts where people are like, nah, I can't trust him. He's not going to stay healthy. He was terrible last season. I was like, nah, let me take him in the first round everywhere. And that worked out pretty well. And I think, again, slightly different, I think we might be heading that way with old Middo here. Middleton played, as I said, very few games, 33 of them, and only played 24 minutes in those games. So not only was he hurt, but he just didn't play anywhere near his regular role. He averaged 15, 4, and 5 in only 24 minutes. He shot only 44%, including only under 32% from 3. He had a pretty high usage, 27%, but there are so many things there that it's just very obvious that he is going to be able to improve on. And over the last month, he got it up to 28 minutes. He averaged 18, 4, and 6 with 0.7 steals. Now, his last fully healthy season, 32 minutes, 20 points, 5.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 1.2 steals, 44 and 89. His shooting numbers were not quite there, but they weren't terribly far off. But he'd been a 41, 37% three-point shooter before going under 32 last season. He did up his assist rate significantly, but his steal rate fell into a hole. And as you can see, there were some really rough shooting issues for him at patches, and he was relatively inconsistent. Some strong weeks and some bad weeks. I think that we can almost scrub nearly all of the production from Middleton last season and forget about it. With the caveat, and we'll get to that more in a little bit, that we still have this specter of the knee injury or time being missed as a part of this. After he came back, out for the wrist, struggled a bit early, but after he came back from the knee injury, was playing a little bit more in second units, came off the bench quite a bit actually, played with pretty high usage. I think that might come down this season, but you saw the usage really spike up towards the end of the season. And the minutes, we've already talked about how poor they were. Like, there's just hardly any weeks where he was useful. There was a couple of decent ones, but he never went over 100 minutes in a week last season. And that's something that I guarantee you, can't 100% guarantee, but I can get pretty close to it, guarantee you it's going to change this season. He's going to go over 100 minutes in a week this season. Despite those lack of minutes, despite some of the shooting issues, his fantasy rank got better and better as the season went on, and he did have a couple of little rough patches in there, but he started to put together some better numbers as those minutes ramped up, and he was playing 28 a night by the end of the season. He's currently being valued at sort of halfway between what he did last season and what he did the year before, and I think he should be pushing him 85% of the year before. Like he was 123rd in -1 ranks, 119th in ESPN points league ranks, 107th in Yahoo points ranks. That's all per game, and then total is obviously way worse because he never played. There is huge bounce back potential here for Middleton, who is not super young, but he's just turned 32. He signed the new contract. I reckon he's probably got 2 more years at this, close enough to this level. Close enough. And I think this is probably the only year that you're going to be able to get any level of discount on him because it's going to turn the other way pretty quickly. But in saying all of that, let's look at his DPM change graph because it's going the wrong way. But that is what happens when you hit the age of 29 as a general rule. You don't become a bad player necessarily, but you become worse than you were the year before. And since the 1920 season, the slope on his Darko graph is heading downwards. Now, it obviously had some pretty serious downturns last season, and I don't think he's necessarily going to be a more impactful player. But it is worth noting that maybe those numbers that he put up 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we don't expect him to get back to that. Maybe he never gets to 1.2 steals. Maybe he's never back to a 41% three-point shooter, and that's all part of the decreased impact that he's having at his advanced age. So while I do expect him to get back and be better than last season, I don't know that we get, that's why I said 85 instead of 100% of his previous production, because he is on the downswing. He's not bad. He's still very good, but he's on the downswing of his career. That's what happens when you turn a certain age. Let's have a look at this head plot. I used this season and last season's data because I think that's important to compare and contrast Middleton. Two different different stats from Basketball Index we're using here. One of them is true usage percentage, and the other one is box creation percentage, and we're looking at the percentiles. Now, what are those two things? True usage is a stat that was invented by Seth Partnow, who used to work for the Bucks, coincidentally, and it basically tries to take into consideration how much usage you actually have. Because at the moment, the regular usage stat tells us how many plays you finish, whether it's through a shot, a free throw attempt, or a turnover. So you could be Malik Beasley and taking spot-up threes. Every time you take one of those, that counts towards your usage, even though you just haven't done anything to get that shot, apart from take it and stand still. True usage takes into consideration assists, as well as potential assists. So how much of the sort of load are you carrying? Box creation was invented by Ben Taylor, who you know from Thinking Basketball. It's a number that gives you an idea, using box score stats, what level of creation load a player is undertaking. So how are they creating open shots for their teammates based on their own individual gravity? Not about assist rate necessarily, but how are you creating shots for yourself and for others? That's what box creation is. So I've got the percentiles for both. So I've plotted Middleton, Butler, Tatum, and LeBron. All wings who do quite a bit of initiation and passing. Obviously, there are MVPs in there. There are legendary top 5 type level producers at certain times in their career in Butler and Tatum. And then there's Khris Middleton. But what you will notice is that on the very far left of this screen is Khris Middleton 2023. He's got a very high box creation percentile, meaning his gravity was opening up a lot of shots for others, and he was important in that way. And yeah, that is better than any season from Tatum in the last 2 years, or Butler, and his season the year before. Obviously, LeBron is the gold standard here. Huge box creation, huge true usage. But Khris Middleton's season there is well behind where he was in 2022, well behind Tatum, and well behind Butler in terms of true usage percentage, meaning that even though he did have an interesting improvement in his assist rate, some of that improvement in his assist rate is taken into consideration with the, maybe that players made more shots off him instead of the potential assists being higher. He was well down. He's in the 60th percentile basically for true usage, when in the past he'd been in 91, 92. So while we look at his inflated assist numbers from last season, he was still really good with box creation, but his inflated assist numbers might come down a little bit. Still be really good when he pushes up, though, into these other minutes and he gets back into that range. Again, showing how good he can be in that range alongside Tatum, alongside Jimmy Butler as a wing creator. He can do it. He did it 2 years ago, and he still was really high with his box creation. The gravity is still there. We just need to see him where he gets back in terms of true usage and he gets more of those opportunities this season. That would be the hope, and that's part of the hope when we talk about his production for the upcoming season and our hopes of being able to get him. Spoiler alert, he's going to be in my sleeper section in a second, that hopefully we can get him a little bit later and get some value out of it. You're cooking lunch. You're down there, you're making yourself a nice, you're not cooking, you're preparing lunch. You've got a sandwich. You're ready to go. I've got my meats, got my veggie, got my salads, got my sauces. You guys would use ranch. I wouldn't. I'd do something different, but that's just different. That's culture. But where's your bread? I've got no bread. Well, instead of ordering restaurant food from DoorDash, they can do groceries now. So you go, DoorDash, my guy, go grab me some bread. Put it into the app. You can choose the different options you got there. Someone will go in there and pick what you need. Maybe you need an onion to go with it. Maybe you need some lettuce, cos, or you need some arugula. What's your favorite type of lettuce? Chuck it in your sandwich as well. You can look at all the substitutions on the DoorDash app because they do grocery for you now. They find all the local grocery stores around you, so you help support the local economy as well. There's over thousands in their system. Go in, get what you need delivered to your door. Get 50% off your first DoorDash order as well, up to a $20 value when you use the code LOCKEDONNBA at checkout. Limited time offer, terms apply. That's 50% off, up to $20, no minimum subtotal, and 0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter the code LOCKEDONNBA. Don't forget, the code is LOCKEDONNBA for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. So yeah, I do have Middleton as a sleeper. Sleeper term is overused, it's overrated, it's meaningless, honestly. There's no one who's sleeping on these players. We all know, or maybe that's true. We all know who these guys are. No one's hidden. There's no hidden gems that we're uncovering. It doesn't exist. But people are not looking at Middleton correctly, I don't think, as a general rule. Yahoo's got him ranked 83rd with an ADP of 86. That is too low. Now, you won't want to go into the top 50 for him. You don't, because that's cutting off any upside value at all. But at 86, 83, I love that. His ADP on Fantrax is 70. On ESPN, he's ranked 65th for categories and 63rd for points. And I actually think that while that's not terrible, but doesn't actually represent sleeper value there. Is a little bit, in terms of per game, yeah, it does actually represent sleeper value. But we've got to take into consideration the risk with this knee problem being an ongoing concern. And his ADP on ESPN is 78 as well. So there is value in certain spots for Middleton. If you're getting him outside the top 72, 72 is 7 rounds. Is it? Not 6 rounds. If you're getting him in round 7 or later, I love it. Your risk of getting a bust pick in round 7, each round you go on, it's higher, and the impact on your team is lower. So if you get him and he gets hurt and it's round 7, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that much. If you get him and he returns 80% of 21-22 value, well, that's a top 50-ish sort of player. And that's really good value at that spot. That's how you get a couple of those blokes. That's how you win a league. That's how you have success in the draft, is by doing that. So I really, you don't have to have Khris Middleton. You don't be like, well, this guy I think might take him, so I'm going to take him at 60, because that's pointless. Get someone different. But when he's sitting there and he's at 75, he's at 80, he's at 86, that's when you go grab him. That's when you go pick him. Very excited to see how he is able to bounce back this coming season. And that brings us to the discussion of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl and what our secret question is for the Milwaukee Bucks. The form is linked in the description below. It's in the show notes for the audio as well. The question is, Khris Middleton, 2 years ago, played how many games? And the answer is, shout out to Mario Lemieux, 66. So just write 66. Don't write 66 games. Just write 66 as your answer over on the entry form if you want in the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl. Let's bust it up and let's talk about Punch Bob. Bobby Portis. I think he's a little bit of a bust. And I'll tell you why, as I just adjust myself in my chair. Bobby Portis, if Brook Lopez is out, if Giannis is out, he's pretty solid. We're not going to debate. I'm not going to debate that. He will go out there, he will score, he'll get rebounds, he'll shoot threes and do that pretty well, and he will be very useful. Like last season, he played 26 minutes a night. Over the final 7 games, he played 27 minutes and averaged 18 and 11. Shot 50%. That's really good. But the bloke doesn't he Ryan Anderson's his way through the assists, steals, and blocks categories. He averaged 2.1 combined assists, steals, and blocks. And I probably should find a good number for that. If you're averaging under this, you're struggling. But 2's a bad one. If you're around 2 with combined assists, steals, and blocks, you're really struggling with your overall fantasy. And what you need to do to maintain useful enough value is you need to get good usage and you need to play 30 plus minutes. And unfortunately, you're relying upon Portis to get those minutes and numbers through injuries to other. Now, you could say that Lopez is 35 because you'd be correct. You could say that Giannis has dodgy knees and you'd be correct. But I don't want to take someone like Portis in these sort of rounds, round 10, round 9, as one of my starters when he's probably not good enough most nights and you're just waiting for someone to get hurt. So he's an ADP of 108. That's the beginning of round 10. So it means some people are going into round 9. Some people are taking him round 10. I can sort of okay with it round 10. I'm not really, but I'm sort of okay with it. Round 11, anything goes. It's complete wildness. Do whatever you want. But there are other certain things here which are pretty crazy to me. Like he's ranked 111th ESPN head-to-head categories. Again, that's the start of round 10. It's one of your starters. I don't love it. But his points league ranking is 88. That's crazy. That's insane to me. That's round 8. As a backup starter who plays 24 minutes. And remember, in the past, he would play all the backup power forward minutes and all the backup center minutes. Jay Crowder exists now. Well, he always existed, but he exists on this team. So Crowder's going to play some of those backup 4 minutes. So there's probably, if on a healthy team with Giannis and Brook playing, there's probably fewer minutes available for Portis than there was in the past. And if Adrian Griffin does Nick Nurse and play 33 minutes of Lopez and 37 for Giannis, that would obviously be insane, but that's even fewer minutes for for Portis. Again, very unlikely to happen. Last season, Portis played 30 minutes as a starter, started 22 games. He played 24 minutes off the bench, playing 48 games. But I would expect that off the bench this season, he doesn't play 24 minutes because of the presence of Jay Crowder. And in those bench minutes, he averaged 12 and 9 with 1 3. And he did go under the Ryan Anderson precipice of under 2 assists, steals, and blocks. He shot 50 from the field, but weirdly 63 from the line for some reason, but 93 as a starter. And he just wasn't that good. And that's the thing. Are you willing to draft as a starter a backup whose value only comes if someone gets hurt? I'm not. Now we do the discussion on the big fella.
Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Both him and Khris Middleton coming off knee surgery. Let's talk Giannis, though. I've gone on and on about this so many times. Giannis has some pretty bad free throw percentage, yes. I think traditional Z scores overstate that. It tells you like a -5 or -4.5, which is a ridiculous number, which would suggest it would be impossible for you to recover from, which is just clearly not the case. You can very easily do it. Go back and watch my show where I introduced the Durant metric. I also talked about the vagaries of free throw percentage. It's actually not that hard to be an 80% team with Giannis on it. You can do it. It does take work and you have to concentrate. And usually, part of the reason you punt with Giannis is not that you can't actually be competitive in it. It's that it requires a poor use of your resources to get you to that spot. But you're going to throw out, and someone's going to be watching this, I know someone is, who's going to throw out Josh. He was actually 104th last season. You can't draft him in category leagues. You can't draft him in 9K, which is blatantly bullshit. Is clearly garbage. You cannot, with a straight face, tell me that Giannis was 40 spots worse than Gary Trent and Delon Wright. You can't tell me it because you're wrong. So understanding how to interpret rankings, what they come from and why they come that way is really important. Now, one thing I will say for Giannis is that I have a little worry about his knee and his defensive stats, but I also think that a large proportion of why his defensive stats dropped last season, and they did, and that hurt as well, was because he was getting like the biggest usage of his career. And he had to have that level of usage because Khris Middleton was out. He had a usage of 38%. The year before, 34. The year before, 33. He averaged 31, 12, and 6 with 0.8 steals, 0.8 blocks on 55% shooting, and 65 from the line on 12 attempts. That's a ton of attempts, man. But also 1 year ago, he shot 72% from the line. So to act like Giannis is a guaranteed 64% free throw shooter is also disingenuous. I'm not here to tell you he's a good free throw shooter because he's not. But there is a world of difference between 72 and 64, or what he was the year before that, 69.
Giggity.
It does make a big difference. And I do expect that his steals and blocks rise with Middleton playing a full scope of the season. What is interesting to note, over the final 2 months of the season, he was at 1 steal and 0.9 blocks. Over the final 11 games, 1.3 steals and 0.8 blocks. And coincidentally, or not, that's when Middleton was back. So, he also shot 62% from the field over the final 11 games. And he struggled a little bit with his field goal percentage at times during the season. And of course, he's not going to be a great three-point shooter. And someone's going to tell me he's also going to be someone you have to punt threes with, which is, of course, again, is complete garbage. It's not hard to recover from those threes. Also, he'd been at over 1 3 per game for the previous 3 seasons and dropped to 0.7. Has he just become bad? Now, I would say that yes, Giannis last season was worse than he was previous seasons. In real life production, I thought he was nowhere near the MVP, despite there was discussions of him being MVP. And in fantasy, he did drop off. But be really cautious about the way that you approach his rankings and his values and his numbers. In a points league last season, he was 4th. He averaged 55 points. His rankings are a little bit all over the place in some spots. Like he's ranked 12th on Yahoo with an ADP of 9. I actually think maybe they're not all over the place. That's relatively reasonable. His points league rank on ESPN is 2. Absolutely fine as well. His category league rank on ESPN is at 8. Totally okay with that as well. I think he should go in the top 8 of every draft. Yes, you probably do have to punt free throws. But before you get all pissy about it, there are people who have Giannis on their team who won free throw categories multiple times last season. It's not the norm, but it's not as extreme as the impact that you seem to think that it might be. Roto, a little bit of a different story. I wouldn't take him in the first round in Roto. I wouldn't. I'd like to get some other guys in there, and then if he falls, do it. Otherwise, someone else takes a hit. That's okay. But I think he's one of the... In recent times, in the past, it was Dwight Howard. Before him, it was Shaq, where fantasy rankings made them look bad, yet you took them in the first round every time. And Giannis is that same player. Don't fall into the ranking anchoring trap with Giannis. He is a first-round guy, and if you decided you want to take him at 6, fine, do it. Go for it. It's not wrong. Cannot wait for the comments. Let's talk about a trade option. I think Grayson Allen is probably the most likely player to be traded here. I think this team should be absolutely fully in the mix for Buddy Hield. They'd have to give up firsts and probably Allen to get him, and that's totally okay. They want to improve that position. That's where the issue is the 2-guard in their starting lineup. Who's on a contract here? Well, it is Grayson Allen. It is Malik Beasley. Both those guys competing for those minutes. I would maybe consider them as 14-team league players. Jay Crowder, we didn't get to do this much last season. We put it actually onto PJ Washington, but the king is back.
Sometimes may be good, sometimes may be shit.
And we're definitely not drafting him. And then Robert Lopez signed a 1 year to be in the front court with his brother, which I could also say for Thanasis Antetokounmpo. What are the rotation risks here? Well, what if Griffin runs the nurse rotations? And Middleton's playing 36 and Holiday's playing 36 and Allen gets the start and plays 34 and Lopez plays 33, then your Portis gets cooked and there's no value for a Beasley or an Allen, whoever's coming off the bench, and then you run the risk of more injuries, of course, but everyone else's value jumps up. They could also stagger things so that one of Giannis, Drew, and Middleton are on the court at all times, and they are the point guards. That we don't worry about Beauchamp handling the ball. God, that'd be dreadful. We don't want Andre Jackson in the rotation. Ty doesn't get a chance. But then it opens up minutes and usage for other players. So if we're staggering those 3, that means that when one of them's off the court, then the other 2 can get higher usage. So that could change some of the value on the positive side for those players. No one really looked to me to be a real permanent monster on this team. So we can skip through that and let's just go to the depth chart. And they are going to start Drew Holiday as a guard. And we haven't really spoken much about Drew. He was solid last season, I thought. Pretty good. Nothing great. Didn't blow us away. But overall, he was pretty good as a player. He was like top 30 in -1 ranks last season. 19, 5, and 7.5 with 1.2 steals. Obviously, he shot terribly in the playoffs, was hyper efficient during the regular season. And while he is 33, he's a year older than Middleton, and we can expect, again, a little bit of a decline. There's no reason that he shouldn't be in those early round-ish sort of discussions. He's ranked at 34 on Yahoo, which might be a little high, like 35 on ESPN, with getting drafted 42 on ESPN, which is round 4. Perfectly safe. No upside really at all, but perfectly... I say perfectly? Because he's 33. And at some point, there is a drop-off. At some point, there's a drop-off. It is worth noting that his -1 rank actually drops him down a little bit, as does his Durant. Whereas the regular ranking might have him at like 38. The Durant puts him at 51. So does -1. So just a little bit of value off there. So I wouldn't want to go early third. Fourth round, no problem. Late third, I consider it. You're chasing assists in that range as well. Very little exciting upside. And the backups there, Wigginton, Andre Jackson, Ty Washington, and AJ Green. Just an absolute garbage combination. Sorry to those guys. They're not rotation caliber guards at this stage. In the wings, it's going to be Grayson Allen and Khris Middleton with backups Malik Beasley, Beauchamp, and Omari Moore on a two-way. Moore is probably more of a point forward than a wing, but I think he'll play a little bit of the two. The shooting is the concern there. Beauchamp, everything's a concern, and Beasley, the defense and everything that's not shooting is the concern for him. Let's look at the forwards. Technically, I don't think they're starting a forward. Middleton's a wing, and Giannis is a big. And their backup forwards are Jay Crowder, Paddy Connaughton, and rookie Chris Livingston, who I don't think's up to it either. Connaughton's one of those players that if he shoots like 62% from two, some of his rankings can look interesting. They're not. He's only a emergency stream guy and definitely not someone you want to draft because, again, Crowder's going to be taking those minutes. And then in the front court, it is Giannis and it is Brook Lopez as the starters. Now, I find it really, really tough, and I did a whole show on this earlier today about Brook Lopez, so a lot of my thoughts can be found in that, the regression show. I don't think Lopez is going to do what he did last season. He really benefited. Usage kept going up and up and up for him as the season went on, with Middleton out or Middleton limited and Middleton coming off the bench. He played more minutes than we really ever had. That might go up again. But also, we don't know what the scheme's going to do. He's 35. He'll be 36 at the end of the season. At some point, something's going to go away. And I'm going nowhere near where he was last season in terms of rankings, Brook Lopez. This season, he's got an ADP of around 59. And even that, I think is too risky. I don't want to do it. He's ranked on ESPN much better. 90th. Totally good. If you want to give him the 80s, okay. I don't want to go much higher. And then there's Bobby Portis and Robin Lopez as the backups. And Thanasis Antetokounmpo is there too. So what about Durant? What about Bazemore? Giannis got actually dropped in Durant. Now, that depends. If you're going to compare it to a straight 9-cat ranking or projection, Giannis shoots way up the board. But if you compare his Durant ranking to a regular -1 ranking, he actually dropped because in -1 he was like 4th. But Durant actually pushed him down a little bit, which was interesting. Still a first rounder. Khris Middleton actually jumped up about 15, 16 spots in Durant versus -1. So pushed him as a top 40 looking guy. And again, when we're getting him in the 70s, I really like that. In terms of Bazemore, Giannis still comes out as a top 15 dynasty asset, even though he is pushing 30 with the knee problem, but still top 15 there. Drew Holiday and Middleton were both outside the top 100, while Marjon Beauchamp snuck inside the top 210. I don't really value Beauchamp that much, but Bazemore saw a couple of things there that had a little bit of interest in him. And that'll do it for me today. Don't forget to follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app. And if you are here on YouTube, thumb it up and leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.
Giannis Antetokounmpo.